Hi everyone, welcome to our AGM for 2025. Could you please take your seats so that we can start the proceedings? I'd like to introduce our chairperson, Teresa Smits, to address you all.
Good afternoon, shareholders. Thank you for joining us today and for your continued support in ClearVue Technologies. It is a privilege to address you as the Board of Directors Chair. As a long-term shareholder, I share both the frustrations and the belief in what this company can achieve. Over the past few months, we have been focused on resetting the business, strengthening governance, and positioning ClearVue to move from promise to delivery. We are now executing far more discipline, transparency, and focus clearly on commercial execution. Our priorities are straightforward: convert our pipeline to revenue, support management in expanding global partnerships, maintain strong governance, and build long-term shareholder value. ClearVue has extraordinary technology, a committed management team, and a rapidly expanding network of global partners. We are seeing real traction in key regions, and the opportunities ahead are significant. I value the trust you have placed in us. My commitment as Chair is that every decision we make will be centred on delivering value, strengthening the company, and building a ClearVue that rewards the patience and the belief shown by its investors who have stayed the course. Thank you. We will now move to the formal part of the meeting. Today I'm joined by fellow board members, our Managing Director, Doug Hunt, our Non-Executive Director, Victor Rosenberg, Non-Executive Director, Michael Pixley, and welcoming Non-Executive Director, Liang Ji. Also on the table is our CFO, Jeff Edwards, and our Acting Company Secretary, Jack Risgaro. We also have in attendance a representative from the company's auditor, Grant Thornton, to answer any questions on the 2025 audit or financial statements. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If we can all just check that our phones are on silent. And if anyone needs to use the bathroom, they're behind the screen and all the way out the building, to the left, outside. There's all signage out there. Thank you. So the format of today's meeting will be as follows. I will begin the formal business of today's meeting being the consideration of all the resolutions as set out in the notice of meeting. I will read through each of the 15 resolutions, and the proxy votes received for each of the resolution will be shown on the screen. There will be an opportunity to question on each resolution after it is read out. Once all the resolutions have been read, the poll will be conducted. The Acting Company Secretary, Jack, will be conducting the poll process. If you are voting at today's meeting, you will have received a yellow voting card upon registration. When we come to the poll, you will be asked to direct your votes on this card and return the card to Jack. If there's anyone in attendance who wishes to vote but has not received a card, please raise your hand now. Okay. Following the poll, the formal meeting will be closed, and then I will introduce our Managing Director, Doug, to deliver a presentation. Following Doug's presentation, I will open the floor to questions shareholders may wish to ask the board and the management. At the conclusion of the Q&A, the meeting will come to a close and the voting results of the meeting will be published to the ASX today. Please note that no recording of this meeting is permitted. A notice of the AGM and proxies. I declare that we have a quorum of members in accordance with the company's constitution and that this meeting is properly constituted. The notice of the AGM was mailed to all registered members on the 29th of October, and I will take the notice as read. Voting on all resolutions will be conducted by poll. For the purpose of the poll, I appoint Acting Company Secretary Jack of Atomic Group, who has examined and prepared summaries of the proxy forms received, to act as returning officer and to conduct the poll. The persons entitled to vote on this poll are all shareholders, representatives and attorneys of shareholders and proxy holders who hold voting cards. If you are attending in more than one of those capacities, you will have been issued with as many voting cards as you have separate capacities. At the appropriate time, I will ask that you mark your vote for the resolutions on the voting card. After all resolutions have been read and voted upon, please hand your voting card to the returning officer, Jack. Are there any questions in relating to the voting process? If the proxies have been inspected and all those validly lodged have been accepted, proxies have been received representing approximately 146 million shares, or 48% of the company's issued capital. Undirected proxies or open votes that have been nominated to the chair of the meeting as their proxy will be cast in favour of each resolution. We will now proceed to the tabling of the 2025 annual report. Financial statements and reports. The first item of business is to receive the company's annual financial report for the year ending June 30, 2025. The financial report and the reports of the directors and the auditors are now laid before the meeting. There will be no vote on this item, and this is a discussion item only. A representative from the company's auditor for the 2025 financial year, Grant Thornton, is present to take questions. I'm sorry to interrupt that, but I believe we have Joe here.
We do.
Yes, sorry, I'm reading, but welcome to Joe. Present to take questions to the conduct of the audit and to the preparation and content of the independent auditor's report. Are there any questions or comments on the financial reports or the reports of the directors and the auditors? Okay. We will now proceed with the resolutions set out in the notice of the AGM. Resolution 1, the adoption of the remuneration report. The Resolution 1 is as follows: to consider and, if thought fit, to pass with or without amendment, Resolution 1, adoption of remuneration report as a non-binding resolution. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. If you have any questions pertaining to this resolution, please raise your hand. We will now move to the next item of business, and as this item of business concerns my own re-election, I will pass the chair to Michael Pixley.
Thanks, Teresa. Resolution 2 is as follows: to consider and, if thought fit, to pass with or without amendment, Resolution 2, election of a director, Teresa Smits, as an ordinary resolution. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are now on the screen. Are there any questions? We'll move on, and I'll pass the chair back to Teresa. There you go.
Thank you, Michael. Resolution 3, election of Director Michael Pixley. Resolution 3 is as follows: to consider and, if thought fit, to pass with or without amendment, Resolution 3, election of Director Michael Pixley as an ordinary resolution. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. If you have any questions pertaining to the resolution, please raise your hand. We will now move on to the next item of business, Resolution 4, approval of Mandate 7.1A. The Resolution 4 is as follows: to consider and, if thought fit, to pass with or without amendment, Resolution 4, approval of 7.1A mandate as a special resolution. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. If you have any questions pertaining to this resolution, please raise your hand. We will now move on to the next item of business. Resolution 5, ratification of prior issues of collateral shares under Listing Rule 7.1. Resolution 5 is as follows: to consider and, if thought fit, to pass with or without amendment Resolution 5, ratification of prior issue of collateral shares under Listing Rule 7.1 as an ordinary resolution. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. If you have any questions pertaining to this resolution, please raise your hand. We will now move on to the next item of business. Resolution 6, ratification of prior issue of placement shares under Listing Rule 7.1. Resolution 6 is as followed: to consider and, if thought fit, to pass with or without amendment Resolution 6, ratification of prior issue of placement shares under Listing Rule 7.1 as an ordinary resolution. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen, and if you have any questions pertaining to this resolution, please raise your hand. We will now move on to the next item of business. Resolution 7, ratification of prior issue of placement shares under Listing Rule 7.1. Resolution 7 is as follows: to consider and, if thought fit, to pass with or without amendment Resolution 7, ratification of prior issue of placement shares under Listing Rule 7.1A and as an ordinary resolution. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. If you have any questions pertaining to this resolution, please raise your hand. We will now move on to the next item of business. Resolution 8, approval to issue placement options. Resolution 8 is as follows: to consider and, if thought fit, to pass with or without amendment Resolution 8, approval of issue placement options as an ordinary resolution. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. If you have any questions pertaining to this resolution, please raise your hand. We will now move on to the next item of business. Resolution 9, approval to issue broker options. Resolution 9 is as follows: to consider and, if thought fit, to pass with or without amendment Resolution 9, approval to issue broker options as an ordinary resolution. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen, and if you have any questions pertaining to this resolution, please raise your hand. We will now move on to the next item of business. Resolution 10, approval to issue performance rights to Michael Pixley. Resolution 10 is as follows: to consider and, if thought fit, to pass with or without amendment Resolution 10, approval to issue performance rights to Michael Pixley as an ordinary resolution. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen, and if you have any questions pertaining to this resolution, please raise your hand. We will now move on to the next item of business, and as the next two items of business concern my own remuneration, I will pass the chair to Michael Pixley.
Okay, thank you. Resolution 11, approval of issue of performance rights to Teresa Smits. Resolution is as follows: to consider and, if thought fit, to pass with or without amendment Resolution 11, approval to issue performance rights to Teresa Smits as an ordinary resolution. The proxies are on the screen for this resolution, and if you've had any questions, please raise your hand. We'll now move on to the next item of business, which is resolution number 12, which is the approval to issue shares under the director fee plan to Teresa Smits. Resolution 12 is as follows: to consider and, if thought fit, to pass with or without amendment Resolution 12, which is approval to issue shares under the director fee plan to Teresa Smits as an ordinary resolution. The proxies for this resolution have been received in relation to this resolution and are on the screen. Are there any questions for this resolution? Yes.
Can I just be reminded, we will be tied up to targets, is that correct?
Absolutely, it's in the explanatory memorandum.
And the targets have been, I think, mentioned already, 30 cents a share, and then 35 cents a share.
No, 30.
30, 50, 75 and $1, but this this particular resolution is regarding my remuneration as a director, which when I was elected, I said that I would take shares rather than being paid as a director. And so what they are is basically on a 30-day VWAP and then issued quarterly. So it's
Right. So to be sure, the 10 and 11 are on performance hurdles, which are quite stringent, and the other one's just fee in lieu by shares. I'll now hand back to Chair Teresa. There you go.
Thank you, Michael. Resolution 13 is the ratification of prior issues of shares to Kidder Williams. Resolution 13 is as followed. To consider and if thought fit to pass with or without amendment, Resolution 13, ratification of prior issues of shares to Kidder as an ordinary resolution. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. And if you have any questions with this resolution, please raise your hand.
Who is Kidder Williams?
Maybe I can answer that. Kidder Williams is like a merchant bank or a business consultancy. And when we first started this restructuring process, we discussed with them the raising of the capital and stuff like that. So that was the advice, and they also did a review of the company in terms of how our structure should be and stuff like that. So in the end, we terminated that agreement because my feeling was that we could effect the raise on better terms to improve shareholder value, and we were able to do that. So but the original fee for the analysis stuff remains.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, so we'll move on to the next order of business, which is Resolution 14, the issue of engagement fee options. Resolution 14 is as followed. To consider and if thought fit to pass with or without amendment, Resolution 14, issue of engagement fee options as an ordinary resolution. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen, and if you have any questions pertaining to this resolution, please raise your hand. We will now move on to the next item of business, is Resolution 15, the election of Liang Ji. Resolution 15 is as followed. To consider and if thought fit to pass with or without amendment, Resolution 15, election of Liang Ji as an ordinary resolution. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen, and if you have any questions pertaining to this resolution, please raise your hand. That concludes the consideration of all resolutions, and we will now move back to the poll. Conducting of the poll, if you are intending to vote at this meeting and have been provided with your voting card, please fill out your voting card now. Our Acting Company Secretary, Jack, will collect your voting card once you are finished. So we'll just close it, yeah? Do I have to fill them out? Just doing a pen. Okay. That now concludes the formal business to be considered today, so I would like to close the formal meeting at 2:25. And now I will pass to Doug, who will present.
So, firstly, thanks for everyone who's made an effort to get here today, and of course for your continued support and investment in ClearVue. Since the restructure, our focus has been pretty consistent on trying to strengthen our governance, sharpen our execution, and accelerate our commercialisation. And we've had a very tight focus on value creation. We successfully completed the capital raise only 4 weeks ago. So, put it in perspective, before we had completed the capital raise, we had to be very conservative on what we were investing and what cash we were outlaying, because we needed to reload the gun, so to speak. And that has only been 4 weeks since we completed that, and we've now started to invest in the things that we need to invest in to drive the business forward. And those things are really our strategic priorities, which is advancing product readiness and certification, progressing customer deployments, and deepening partnerships that position ClearVue for sustainable revenue growth. And looking ahead for 2026, it's a little bit more of the same. We need to continue our commercial scale-up, hopefully win some more projects, build credibility, industry credibility with more strategic partnerships. We need to maintain a strict capital discipline. We need to extend our runways as long as we can, and we need to make sure that every dollar we spend, we have a clear path to getting a return on that investment. And of course, we have to deliver operational excellence. The projects such as we announced this morning and the other projects we have in the pipeline, if we deliver substandard product that's not sufficient quality or not deployable, that would be disastrous. So for us, that operational excellence side is a key factor. And of course, we try to give you guys as much open communication and timely communications as we possibly can, given the commercial constraints of the business. There are a couple of things that I just want to cover off that a few shareholders have asked me in the last couple of weeks. And the first one is about our certifications. So to be clear, about 90% of our products are completely certified. And we're undergoing the certification process at the moment, which I'll refer to on some of them, and I'll give you some more details in the presentation to come. But most of them are already done. The other question I had was about capital. And I think we talked about this when we first did the webinar, when we started the restructure of the business. And what's important to understand is that the way that we've structured the business in terms of manufacturing is capital light. So what that means is that in glass is completely bespoke. Nobody holds stock of glass because there's too many variables in size and coatings and all sorts of things, thicknesses, edge treatments. And so what happens in the glass industry is that typically you are not making, so our payment terms basically are, we take 10% when we get an order, we take 40% when the client signs off on the final shop drawing before it goes to manufacture, we take another 40% before we ship it, and then we take the final 10% when it goes to site. And these payment terms are paralleled with our manufacturers. And so this means that if we were to get larger jobs, and as we get more and more jobs, there should be a very minimal drain on our working capital. And so someone asked, I've said that a few times, but somebody asked me about that again the other day, so just thought I wanted to cover those 2 points off. So I'm going to show a little bit of a presentation, and this is largely focused going back to our webinar in August. And I think in August we stood up here and we said we're going to do this, that and the other thing. And this presentation really is going back to what we said and what we've achieved. So, of course, the first thing was the restructure and the operating cost reduction. So we've taken well over $3 million out of the operating cost of the business. We've either divested or closed down underperforming assets and those that, in my view, were not strategic priority. And we're continuing to do a comprehensive review of our marketing spend, R&D spend, patent spend, and operational spend to try to reduce our costs even further, and that's an ongoing thing. As you can imagine, with the number of patents that we hold as a company, and I don't know if any of you guys have ever read a patent document, but they read like a small novel, and so it's a bit of a long process, but we're slowly getting through that. In terms of the capital raising, we successfully raised at what I felt were pretty reasonable commercial terms. We raised, for those of you not aware of those terms, we raised at 1 cent rather, below the closing price before we conducted the raise. We did a 1-for-1 20-cent option, which expires in June 2026, and we did a 1-in-4 option at 35 cents, which from memory expires in June 27. So I think that those terms, given the position that the company was in, were quite good. But what I think we also did as part of that process, and what we are continuing to do, we have sort of changed the investor relations in this business, and what I mean by that is we are doing we're seeing investors all the time. And I would say in the last, well, I was in Sydney 2 days ago and I pitched a room full of 70 investors. We're getting inquiry now for some big funds. We're working with RM Capital, with Spark Plus, with a group called Arrowhead Capital in the US, and we're really trying to drive that buying on the screen to support your investment. And I think this is quite different to what was happening before. And my approach is to continual contact, build the relationship, explain the value of the company. Why is this company in my view, it's undervalued. Why is our company worth investing in? And so this is something that we're going to continue to do on a consistent basis. And in fact, I think I'm doing another one of those pitches in each capital city over the next 6 months. So we're trying to work to drive the share price and maintain the share price for you guys, and also to help us if we need further capital in the future to be able to raise capital on the best terms possible. Of course, the big news today is our first sale over $1 million, and I'm very hopeful. And this, of course, is important for 2 reasons. Well, of course, 1, it's a sale. 2, it's recladding. It's a whole reclad of 2 towers. 3, it comes from a licensed partner. And as you all know, our strategy has always been to go to market from licensed partners. And I'm going to talk about licensed partners a bit more actually, I think it might be the next point, actually. So we're now getting a lot of our inquiry from our licensed partners. So something like, this strategy is starting to work. And of course, at the last webinar in August, we talked about before the AGM, we would sign 2 new licensees, and we've done that. But we've done that with some very, very credible companies. So Kookyoung is a major glass processor in Seoul in South Korea. They're a listed company, so you can look them up on the internet. They supply to all of the major construction companies in South Korea. They also made the glass for KTX trains. They have some advanced testing facilities. The factory is really impressive, having visited it myself. And this is particularly important because you may remember when we did the announcement for the Hong Kong trial, and we were talking about the payback of the product. So in Hong Kong, the trial announcement, I believe, I think I'm pretty close to these numbers. I believe we announced that the payback before government subsidies on a 40-storey tower was 4.8 years, and that with the feed-in tariff from the Hong Kong government, that dropped to 2.6. With the Korean government subsidies, the payback is about 18 months. But more importantly, BIPV is mandated in South Korea. So every building that is built in South Korea now must have a BIPV component. And this license agreement with Kukyoung allows us to participate in those government subsidies. So this is a major milestone for access to that market. And it's probably the most credible player in that market. And so this, for me, was Clifton did a wonderful job of bringing those guys to the table. Of course, the next one is Emirates Glass. So Emirates Glass are 40% of the facade glass market in the Middle East. This is a major player with an amazing reputation. And I think the signing of those guys is really good for a number of reasons, but not the least of which is a bit of a validation of our strategy of building these partnerships. So when we signed the cooperation agreement with Landvac, which I think is in the next point, but basically Clifton sent Emirates Glass the ASX announcement for Landvac, and that gave Emirates Glass the confidence to sign with us. So the illustration there is that the galaxy of partnerships that we have built and that we're continuing to build, and you'll see a lot more coming in 2026, this is all about building our credibility, our industry credibility on the manufacturing side and the ability to deliver on the customer side. And so I think this is a very good illustration of how that works in practice. And well, as I just said, we've got more coming, and 26 is going to be a really interesting year in this area, I think. So I think we achieved that we said we were going to do. Of course, we did some other strategic partnerships. We launched the new metal-backed range of products. So those are currently in certification for CEC testing, and we will decide a go-to-market strategy for those probably early in the new year. The testing should be completed for Australian installation around about March. And of course, the partnership with Landglass. So Landglass's reputation, as I've said many times, is they're like the Rolls-Royce of tempering machines, and they also are the world leader in vacuum glass technology. And they are already pitching our products in China, which is a big thing. But the most important thing is we've now opened the subsidiary company in Hong Kong, and early next year we will complete the joint venture to hold the joint IP that we're going to develop together. And I'm hoping that at next year's AGM I'll be able to show you a product which will be fundamentally game-changing that we will develop together over the next 12 months. So you can watch this space for Landvac and the new developments in that area, but this is going to be a very, very exciting product if we can do they've done their part in the design, we have to do our part now, but I believe that we have a good chance of doing that successfully. And of course our partnership with Airbus. So the partnership with Airbus is bringing us new inquiries all the time, and this is going to be increasingly important to us as we travel the next few months. So we talked about Gen 3 a little bit at our webinar, but we've now come almost to the end of that. We have produced, in fact, that's a version 3 window you can see over there. You guys can have a look afterwards. Unfortunately, this window is the first one we've made with spectrally selective coatings. And what does that mean? That means that, when you're driving home, whatever, and look at the buildings in the city, you'll see the reflective finish on the glass. And this version of the window, not only is it more power and not only is it cheaper, but it enables us to match those low E coatings. So when you're driving past a building, we can make solar glass now that looks exactly the same colour with exactly the same reflective properties. And this is a massive advance. And I should say also with no thermal detriment, in fact with a thermal improvement. So this is the first example of that tower. Unfortunately, we shipped 2 of the handmade prototypes back, and this was prototype 1, and prototype 2 is in a box out the back. And of course, the best one breaks, right? So that one broke in transit. So this is prototype 1. So there's a little bit of difference from when you'll see the finished product. The finished product will have a black frit, so you won't see the gaps, and it will have a black solder, so you won't see the silver colour. But the other advantage, of course, and I think I remember reading somewhere, a shareholder asked me, are we making the strip bigger, right? The edge bigger to get the power? And the answer to that's no. So we can make the same power we were making with version 2 with only a 40mm strip in the version 3 window. And the picture that we published where I got that question from, why did we make it with such a wide strip? And the reason for that is we have flexibility in the strip size now, right? We can make it many different sizes. And the reason that we made the prototypes for testing with the largest width is because in solar, when you test the most high power one, you get certificates for the lower power ones. So that's why that was wider. But actually we have a great deal of flexibility now, which also makes the product more attractive, in my opinion. So the fire panel. So I think that could not be put into better context than the events of this week. And we probably should all be thinking about those poor people in Hong Kong in those towers. So for us, we've been working on this for some time. The design validation samples are in Australia for our second round of design validation testing, and that will happen over the next 4 weeks, probably 4 to 5 weeks. We've initiated a program with Jensen Hughes. They are formerly Warrington Fire. They're Australia's leading fire engineers, basically. And what I want to explain about that is our design validation testing is where we test the actual component. So we basically, burn a cladding piece, whatever. But the test we must pass, the game-changing test, is a system test where we need to put that into a framing system and burn an entire 3-storey facade. And what we were trying to do, because this is clearly an expensive test, right? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get that test to comply to as many global fire standards as possible with one test. And this means we have to invest time to identify the framing system, actually, not so much our product, but the framing system we're going to use in the test, so that that framing system complies to, the US, Europe, Korea. So this is what it's sort of delaying us a little bit, and also with Chinese New Year, of course. I don't think I pushed anything.
Ran out of time.
I ran out of time? I can talk underwater about this stuff, you guys, as you probably already found out, I guess. Anyway, the answer to that is this panel, if we can achieve it, is going to be a fundamentally game-changing product and will be the only product of its type in the world. And this product relies on much of our core IP. It relies on our junction boxes. It relies on our thermoplastics. It relies on... it can't be done without those things. So it's going to be very interesting to see over this next 6 months where we can bring that to market. And on the subject of junction boxes, we've finalised the design of the 2 variants. If you look closely at that sample window, you'll see that there are junction boxes encapsulated within the seal. And this is technology that is exclusively ours. I don't think anyone else can do that. And we've manufactured the moulds to manufacture. We've manufactured the testing samples, though they're in test at TUV at the moment for the IEC standard, and we're about to commence testing with UL for the balance of the world standard. And you guys have also, no doubt, seen some of our ads where we're recruiting. So, of course, now we have some money in the bank. We have to make the right investment decisions to make sure that we are going to have some prospect of making this company give you a return on capital. And one of those key things is being able to service the inquiries and the proposals. And so we plan to have a bid team established in Manila. So in Manila you can get quite well qualified engineers at price that we couldn't afford to do if we were doing that in Australia. So that process has already started, and hopefully we're going to have that in place by the end of January next year. We've also been recruiting for a couple of local roles, a local marketing person, and there's, I think, we need a standards person, and so there's a bit of recruiting to do. And then the pipeline, which of course is always the interesting one, right? So before we go into the numbers, which we've got a slide on that coming separately, one of the other things we've done is redo the CRM system. So we've got a new CRM system so we can track our inquiries and stuff better. And and I think the onboarding of our new big partners, this is going to increase our proposal load. Right, and I think if we execute on our licence plan for next year, our proposal load is going to increase diametrically. So we have to resource that, and it takes training and time. So this is hence we're going to start in January. So we need to maintain our market-defining IP advantage. And I think one thing you can be confident in, I mean, Clifton, myself and Tao, we met some of the largest glass companies in the world over the last 3 or 4 weeks, and I tell you, we have the best technology in the world, and that's them telling us, not the other way around. And that's because we're designing for deployment, we're designing for fire performance, we're testing for longevity, we do the accelerated aging testing, and then the other thing that we want to focus on in the coming year is improving the building envelope. So that's going to be a bit of work around framing systems, be a little bit of work around how we deploy the glass to maximise its thermal performance. So I think we've talked about that, so we're going to skip that one. So this is what's happened in our sales pipeline in the last few months. We've had some pretty decent growth, particularly in Oceania, Asia and Africa. And I'm hoping that we might get a couple extra Christmas presents before Christmas, hopefully. But we have some projects now that are right on the cusp, and I'm feeling pretty confident that we're going to be able to deliver those in the not too distant future. As well as we've loaded up the front of the machine again and continuing to load the front of the machine so that in 18 months' time, or whatever our usual sales cycle is, 18 months to 2 years, that we're going to have some more consistent revenue. So I feel like what we've been doing has been working and should drive much, much more when we talk about the marketing slide. So Hundreds St George's is not quite finished yet, unfortunately, but should be finished next week or two. And this is actually down to the installer. They've had our glass, we've done our bit, and had done our bit a long time ago. World Bank in Nigeria, that's also just about finished, I think next week or something. They did a bad measurement on a capping, so they had to, all the glass is installed, but the cap is not there yet. So that's the last piece that's missing. They have to manufacture that locally. Tattersalls Club, we are in depth in the wiring design that we'll deploy on schedule, I think. June or July next year, we will commence the manufacturing of that glass after Chinese New Year. And Prefabulous, we're still waiting for that unit to be sited. So we've fitted the glass is in ready to go. We're using the Helios product to make the building net zero on the roof, and we're waiting for that to be sited before we fit that. So nothing's much changed there from our last update, really. So, marketing. A lot of commentary about marketing. I've had a lot of feedback from shareholders about marketing. The first thing I want to say is that, you know, when we did this capital raising, we were pretty thin when that money came into the bank. And therefore, you know, marketing requires money. right? Like, marketing isn't free. And we've done our best to provide information to the market and to the shareholders, I suppose, on a shoestring budget. But now that we have the capital we need, we are going to change that. So you may know that we've done a minor refresh of the website, but we are going to do a complete remake, and that remake will happen, should be end of Q1 2026. And I think when you guys see what we've got in mind for that, you'll be very, very happy with it. A lot more data, a lot more technical information, you know, it'll be completely transformative. We have had a great deal of media success, I believe. We've done a lot of interviews, we've had a lot of articles, we've had a lot of national daily, so that's getting better. And I think as we go along, that should be, you know, that's a little bit like you need to become the go-to guy. That takes a little bit of time, but I believe we should be in that situation by this time next year, everything going well. And of course, we want to boost our marketing spend by marketing with our partners. So the quality of partner we've put on in the last year at least, you know, people like Viridian, you know, Kookyung, Emirates, Alude Tech, all of our partners we will do co-marketing with. And this will enable us to extend the bang for the buck. If we market together, if we're paying 50-50, we're going to get twice the bang that we would have got if we're doing it by ourselves. So that really is our strategy, to engage with our partners and to deliver that. Before we start the Q&A, that's the Q&A slide, but before we start the Q&A, of course, there's a couple of big things happening today, and one of those things is that our founder, Victor, is retiring. And I think that, you know, the reason we're all in this room is because it was his vision in the beginning. And now I think that he's passing the baton to us to commercialise this business and to make it a functioning, commercial, profitable company. And I, for one, don't intend to let him down. But I think Victor might like to say a few words. Vic?
Really hard to keep this, but I'll show it a touch later. Well, to colleagues, friends and shareholders, today marks the closing of a chapter that has shaped my life. When I first began thinking about whether glass could do more than simply let pass through, I did not imagine the journey that would follow. It started with a question, an embryo of an idea, and for a long time remained nothing more than that. There was no roadmap, no clear precedent, and no assurance it would ever succeed. There was only curiosity, a damn lot of determination, that I can tell you, and a belief that if the science held, something genuinely useful might emerge. Over the years, that early idea grew into a proof of concept, a prototype, and eventually a technology capable of standing on the world stage. I have watched it progress through the laboratory trials, the engineering hurdles, partnerships, and setbacks, of which there were many, and breakthroughs. I have seen it take form in greenhouses, commercial buildings and facades. And I've heard people from across the world say to me that they see the value of turning light into more. The more is electricity. I also just want to give you a little bit of history of the business because I don't think any of you know of it, particularly the board. Late 2010 is when I actually started. And I went to Israel to the Technion because the Technion is one of the top institutes in the world. And I met with Professor Morris Eisen, who was the Dean of the Faculty of Chemistry. And he was dealing in luminophores or luminescent materials, organic in the visible range. And we are dealing with inorganic in the infrared range. So he was very, very keen to work with us. We put together a program for the first year, $200,000, which I agreed to pay. You had 2 PhDs and himself. So everything was set, except when I went to the legal, that's when the mess started coming in. I brought the technology, I paid the money, but they wanted to own it and then charge me a royalty. And in fact, that's when Jamie was, I think he called himself Elevation Lawyers, was my lawyer at the time. So we left there, and in fact, Jamie even suggested go and speak to ECU. They've got a photonics section, that's physics and optics. And we went to see a Professor Kamal, and the same discussion, except there I walked away where we owned the IP and not the university. But of course, there was a royalty. And Misha was part of the discussion, as Nur, as were many others. And we went ahead, we started in January, and after the first year, that's what we developed. A little 2x2. It's hard to believe that today, this product is now sitting in 3 square meter glass, whatever size. That's the journey. That was the first year, and every year we increased it to 5x5, 10x10, 20x20, until we hit a square meter. And that's what I called a commercial model. But that's how we started in the first year. Our technology presents a paradigm shift in the way glass will be used in the building and construction industry. Glass will no longer just be a component of the construction industry, but also a renewable energy resource. That is my own statement, and in fact, that is the business model. That's the business. And that should, Dougie, always stay on the website because that is the founder's model. I used that in a big TED talk in Melbourne in 2014. I also want to mention some of my long-serving staff, been with me a long time. Jamie, of course, he's been with me 15 years, I suppose. Misha, who's here, who's our lead scientist, has been with me also about 15 years. Tao, who's here as well, he's been with me probably 12 years. Christopher is not here?
No, he had a personal business.
Okay, he's a mechatronics engineer. I actually met him through Arup because I was speaking to Arup. I wanted to produce a autonomous product where the power that the glass produces can be used to power other technologies. And he was part of that. After that, I took him to come and work for me as well, so he came as well. And then we come to Doug. He came here. How I got to know Doug is he was part of the ACRE, the electrical people that built the greenhouse. And there was an interest, whatever, and he said, listen, can I do 1 day a week here? I said, 1 day a week? Yeah, all right, 1 day a week. That's how I started. The 1 day then became 2 days a week, 3 days a week, and eventually 6 days a week. Well, Dougie, one hell of an achievement, my boy. From starting 1 day a week 5 years ago to be the CEO of ClearVue, well done, my boy, well done. Clifton, who's also here, started with me about 3 years ago. And Roz, where's Roz? Not here? Oh. Well, I had a girl working here called Kathy who I thought that you could never replace her, but she, for whatever reason, left after many years. And Ros applied and got the job. And I said, there's no ways this girl can actually be anything up to Kathy's standard. Well, I'll tell you, Rosie, you did more, you did better. When we needed to move heavy glass plates, she came to work with workman's boots and shorts. You know, she really was prepared to do everything, and a wonderful person. Okay, I'm not sure where she is. To stand here now and see this company recognized internationally by architects, researchers, and industry leaders is something that brings immense pride to me. It has never been the work of one person, I have to tell you that. Every scientist, every engineer, every board member, investors and partners have supported and have helped shape this journey. The idea may have started with me, but the success belongs to all. Stepping aside is not easy. This company has been part of my life for many years, and I care deeply about its future. But part of leadership is knowing when the next stage requires new hands, new energy, and new perspectives. ClearVue is entering a period of opportunity and growth that deserves exactly that. I leave with confidence because I have seen what this team can do and achieve. I leave with gratitude in the trust that you have placed in me, and above all, I leave with pride. Pride in the science, pride in the work, and pride in seeing a simple idea grow into a global contribution to the way we think about energy and the built environment. My vision is for CPV to be leaders to achieve net zero buildings through both building integrated and building applied solution technologies. We are the future for net zero buildings and also are the future for sustainable cities and green buildings for tomorrow. I look forward to watching ClearVue continue to grow, to influence and to lead. The future is bright and I remain its strongest supporter. And Dougie, you have given me the best farewell present, my mate. $1 million order from South Africa, which is my country that I was born in. Guys, thank you very much.
So I guess that now leads us to the Q&A. So any questions from the floor, I guess? Oh, okay. So I guess actually, considering now everyone's elected, we can say welcome to all the new board members. In particular, our most recent addition, Mr. Lang Ji. So Liang and I met. Must be 2 years, eh?
Yeah.
And how Liang and I met is that we took our first junction box design to UL. And we met two very lovely young lady engineers, and we were talking about how we were going to certify, how we had to design for certification. And anyway, Tao and I were, I think it was Tao, me and Chris, it was three of us, wasn't it? We're on the way back to the hotel and the phone rings and there was these two lovely ladies asking us, our boss is here from America. He hasn't seen anything like this, he wants to meet you guys. So the next day we back to UL and it's my privilege to meet Liang. So Liang is one of the most highly qualified solar engineers in the world. He sits on every major standard committee. And his knowledge, not only of solar, but of building thermal development, he wrote a report, for example, for UL on the collapse of the World Trade Center. He didn't know it at the time, but he gave me the key idea for the fire panel, actually. And I have to tell you, for him to join our company's board, if he didn't believe 100%, it's a reputational risk, right? And I'm very proud to have him as a board member, and I'm very proud to call him my friend too, as far as that goes. It's welcome.
Thank you very much to introduce me, and I'm so happy. We really remember 2 years ago our talk. But one thing to clear, I didn't tell you anything. You thought yourself, because as a UL engineer, we are strictly required not tell any clients anything about the product design, because you don't want to be a coach and to be a judge. At that time, I'm the judge, so I didn't tell you anything. Now I'm free, especially I'm in this family, so I will contribute all knowledge I had and to this future. One more sentence. I should admit I got a very huge shortcomings is I'm face blinded. When you talk to me, I can remember every topic we talked, but maybe next day you talk to me, I forgot your name or your face. It's not what I ignore you, it's I'm just this characteristic is face blinded. I'm looking for work with all of you. Thank you.
Questions? So, yeah, sorry, questions from the floor.
Yeah, Doug, thanks for your presentation. Just a question around payback. So, the guidance you've given is that payback is less than 5 years for the whole project, including installation costs. Now, we all know builders and construction industry, they're all tight asses. They've got to put a window in on a new building.
Doubt.
So often they're not so much focused on the payback of the whole project, but the difference between the cost of our glass, which is more expensive than your standard panel that's not solar. So the question is this, have you got any guidance, firstly, how much more expensive is our glass? Is it 10%, 50%? And secondly, what's the payback on that delta?
Well, that actually exactly what that payback is, right? So when we calculate the payback, what we do is we basically take the cost of the... So BIPV is different to rooftop, right? Because if we don't put solar panels on our roof, we still got the roof. But with BIPV, when we're doing glass or cladding, the building needs glass or cladding anyway. And so what we do in our payback calculation basically is we take the cost of our glass, we take the cost of the electrical install. So that means the wiring, the inverters, the plugs, whatever, right? The rapid stop devices, all those things. And then we take the cost of the normal product off. And then we work out the generation. And those paybacks I quoted you on today's power price. Now, some of you may have noticed the news from Reserve Bank yesterday that power prices went up in Australia 30-odd%. Now, that, of course, was largely based to residential homes and government subsidies and things. But one thing you can be dead set sure of is the price ain't staying the same. But those paybacks at the moment are worked out on that basis.
But they're on the delta. They're on the delta.
Yes. Yeah. And but what I think is mostly important to consider, right? When we're talking about this stuff as a long-term play and why the built environment needs to change, is that everyone knows data centres, right? Everyone is like, wow, let's build a data centre. Like at the moment, the investment in data centres is huge. Data centres use massive amounts of electricity, massive. And so the demand from our grids is going to get greater and greater, and the price that you and I are going to pay for electricity is going to get greater and greater, clearly. And for the moment, our paybacks are only based on the paybacks today. We don't increment the power price in those calculations. Now, the other thing is, which I think will be a significant improvement to those figures, but we don't calculate it at the moment. So what we know from our testing and what we know from the data of real-world deployments in Hong Kong, Hong Kong's good glass for me to talk about because I basically only need one more piece of data to have the whole suite of testing, but I got 3 of the 4. And what we know from Hong Kong is when we're talking about the coating on the window, so one of the biggest determinants of building energy use is something called solar heat gain coefficient. And that refers to the amount of heat that is being transmitted through the window from the sunlight. And due to some testing, we sort of came to this by our own volition, really. But we did a test in Singapore, and I coated the cells with low E. And it was a very efficient low E. I still have a piece of glass upstairs, actually, because I wanted to see what would happen. And I hypothesised at the time that we were going to get 25% of the generation, but we actually only got I think it was 5%, wasn't it, Tao? And so then that led me to thinking about the spectral part of that. And I'm sure Liang probably knew all this. I should have just gone and had a coffee with him. But anyway, that led me to think about the spectral part, and then it led us to the fact that our product, when solar makes electricity, solar actually is turning the same wavelengths that we reflect with a low E coating into photons. So what I'm trying to say is, to put another way, so what I'm trying to say is, if we have 2 pieces of black glass, right, and they're in the sun, each piece is getting precisely the same amount of energy, yeah? And what we're doing in a BIPV panel is we are turning the infrared photon into an electron, and we're piping that out of the bottom. So as it turns out, even though we sort of found this out ourselves, as it turns out, there is a global push to make a standard on this phenomena. And we know from our testing, say for example, that for the glass we tested in Hong Kong, the published SHGC was 0.25. We sent that to America to be tested, and the SHGC on that was 0.22. So that's a 15% improvement. But critically, it's a 15% improvement without affecting the transparency, because typically the better the SHGC performance, the darker the glass. So this will also be true of our solid stuff. So the cladding, this will be true. So I think the school of thought for the moment is that if a panel is 22% efficient, it's going to be roughly 15% cooler. This number or this impact is not being taken into account in our paybacks. And in fact, well, yeah, the building, the best power is stuff we don't have to use, right? And that's our job. Our building's about systems, right? That's why we developed our own frames. Building's about systems. So we make the glass, but we need to be able to deploy it in such a way. It's no point, this glass we're making with Landvac, for example, right? This is amazingly advanced glass. The glass is about as thick as my iPhone, and this is an Air, by the way, so it's a thin one. It's about as thick as my iPhone, but it has the same insulation value as 1.5 metres of bricks, right? This is advanced glazing. But we make an advanced window like that, and we put it in a standard aluminium frame, right? So it's system. When we're talking about the fire test before, I was talking about the framing system. So in a building fire, the framing system is integral to the fire performance. And, what we're talking about here, buildings are always going to burn, right? Fire engineering is there. Unfortunately, for those poor people in Hong Kong, it wasn't there, and they had no time to get out of the building. I watched a video of that last night, and it made me cry because it was just so fast. The chimney effect was amazing, right? And we have to design so that people get time to get out of their house, down the stairs, and that is what fire engineering is. And if we can solve this, so you can all go home and Google it, right? You can go home and Google solar panels and fire performance, and you'll find that the solar industry has been trying to get the fire departments to change their fire standards, which is never going to happen, right? And if we can solve this conundrum, this company is massively undervalued if that patent works. I think it's undervalued now. If that test works, it's worth 5-6 times what it's worth now. So, what we're trying to do, and what we've been trying to do for the last 2 years, is remove the barriers to BIPV deployment. And slowly, we're like dropping them off, you know what I mean? We've got the colour down, we've got the framing down, we've got the wiring system down, we've got the how we analyse it down, we've got all of that down. And we just need to get better and better, and that's what we're going to do.
I've got a question on governance.
Go.
So in August, when I was here last, you made a statement that subsequently was confirmed to the ASX that ASX disclosures over a 2-year period were fairy tales. And then the recent November Q&A, you said that my knowledge of public companies you can write on the back of a postage stamp with the texter.
That's right.
You've also said that the situation is untenable and cannot continue. So I look at the governance and I'm extremely concerned about the ability of the company to execute on its promises. I believe in the
Okay.
technology. And then I look at the announcement today, which is a great announcement, but when you look at it, it's market sensitive. There's no real price, there's no real date, and there's no, as far as I understand, they're in the early design definition stages with no specifications. As a shareholder, how can I be assured that you, who has acknowledged that you have no experience in running a public company, can write on the back of a texter? It's not funny. I mean, I don't think it's
Well,
funny.
no,
You
sorry.
think it is?
So
How
there
am
are-
I, as a shareholder, to be concerned that we have appropriate continuous disclosure and
Well-
appropriate governance? I mean, I look at the last September quarterly, which I thought was farcical.
Okay. Well, I guess you're entitled to your opinion. But I'd say a few things. The first thing is, I'm not the font of all knowledge. And the first thing you've got to do, you want to learn something, is identify what you have to learn. And we will take steps to do that. And, I haven't run public companies before 100%, and I'd be the first to admit that. But governance to me is making sure that we manage your funds correctly. It's making sure we invest them properly. It's making sure that we have our systems in place so that we are doing the right thing and making sure we have verification. And those things we're doing, as I'm sure our auditor here will attest. And I think that, I'm not perfect, right? I'm a guy who wants to get this thing going to where I think it can go. And I think that the focus that we've had on this area, I mean, you may want to ask yourself, well, no, maybe not. What I'm trying to say is, I think we're going in the right direction. The first step you've got to do, and I definitely said that, you're right, that, what I know about public companies, but I'm a fast learner. I didn't know anything about glass 3 years ago either. So we will take those steps to improve, and we've already started to do that. We've refreshed our policies. We've done work already on this, and we will continue to do so. There's also a policy of board refreshment, so we will have some new board members coming over the next 4 or 5 months. And, and our board members will tell you, if you're concerned that I'm sort of running roughshod over everybody and making my own decisions, well then I would suggest to you that you don't know Teresa very well and you don't know any of our board very well, because that is just not how it works. And if that's the governance that you're referring to, then I'm telling you they're doing a pretty good job. And at the end of the day...
you wouldn't know because you've got no experience.
Well, mate, I'm sorry, but, at the end of the day...
I'm just going on what you said, that's all.
Well,
I wrote you an email.
I said that 100% about public companies, but I have just not run... I've run a lot of other ones, mate, and I've made them pretty successful, and I haven't got any marks on my arms from the handcuffs. So at the end of the day, running a company, whether it's a public one or a private one, is effectively the same. You must invest and you must get a return on your shareholders' capital, and we're doing that. And we're going to do that in the future. But I'm happy to, I know that we're going to reply to a letter I understand you wrote, and we'll do that. But, you know, if you're telling me that, you know, I don't know how to run a company, that's a different thing. But the other thing is, just so everyone's totally clear, if someone comes to me and I think they can do a better job than me, I'm very happy to go home and play with my motorbike collection. Next.
Thank you. My name's Peter Dont, shareholder, and I have two questions. First question, in one of the slides, it talked about cash flow.
Yes.
And it said 38 to 48 months.
Yes.
How did you derive at that timing?
Well, one thing I have a fairly good history at is financial modelling. And of course, financial modelling is only really an addition of your commercial assumptions. And as you know, our assumption typically is we're working on a 30% margin. And I took a view and made a business plan, because when we started, well, anyway, that's another story. But basically, I made some numbers, and we've all looked at it as a management team and thought, what is achievable? And, you know, of course, there's assumptions in there. But I feel like these are reasonably conservative assumptions, and I feel like we can look forward to growing that 36 to 48. We will be cash flow positive. Like, this business is hard because, you know, for example, clearly, I would have liked to have had more than one project to be coming to this meeting with, and and we're working pretty hard, and we've got a few of them that are like this, you know. So I'm like hoping that we're going to be able to give you some more Christmas presents before Christmas, but. You know, what happens is, you know, you get a meeting and something's going to get awarded, and this wasn't just our stuff, this was a whole facade, right? And what it comes down to, so they've got all the drawings on the table and stuff, they're deciding what contract they're going to award it to. In this case, we're spec'd, so we've quoted every contractor. So for us, it doesn't really matter, I suppose. But the point is, some engineer says, what about that? And that's 4 weeks. And so, you know, it's a difficult industry to predict. But I think in the macro sense, because when we're talking 3 or 4 years out, we're talking macro. We're not talking, you know, that's medium term, right? And we're not talking short term. It's much easier to predict this industry medium term because there's enough, you know, the sales cycle is quite long, but this is a multiple of the sales cycle, right? So I feel at the moment where we are over the last 4 months, you know, we are really seeing significant change in this business. We're seeing more industry people wanting to partner with us. We're seeing more inquiry. We're seeing more confidence, I think, in the market. And these things will come home. You know, it's a slow process. And it's not easy, but we have also been working on a number of these things for a long time. That South African project, Clifton, how long have you been working on that? That's got to be 18 months at least.
I wouldn't say it's not as bad. It's a substantial amount of time.
Yeah, so it takes time. But we'll deliver. Because in the end, I think I may have said this before. I feel like I'm saying a few things I said before, but in the end, it's about the competitive advantage, right? First, you've got to have differentiation, but we have that in spades. Like, you know, our only real competitors are not like Onyx and Matrix. Our real competitors are Chinese solar factories who need to find places to put capacity because they're not selling enough solar panels. And we have unique technology that the building industry will pay for because it promotes longevity and, you know, we've got a good competitive advantage. The second thing is, can we be in the price range? And the answer is we can. So I feel like the underpinnings of the business are good. And I know that not just me, but my whole team, we're very confident that we can commercialise this business.
My second question,
Oh, sorry.
and I said two questions. So my second question was about a Christmas present that wasn't mentioned. We got $1 million from the government, and 550 went to a debt, I think, and 450 went in the bank. Rough numbers. But could you just explain what that debt was, just so we sort of understand what it is, and also explain what future potential the company might have to get more money out of the federal government?
So two things there. First one is the debt was just a cash flow finance. It was like we borrowed money against the rebate. We knew that was coming, the prior management did at least. So we won't be doing that again, but that's what we did. In terms of the federal government, one of the things that I would say that the thing that I probably haven't delivered on that I talked about in the webinar, mostly because I've had a few other little fires, is our contact with the Australian government. We haven't done that interface well enough yet, but we will. Yes, next year I start to do that, and I think that we have, for example, we've spoken to Arena. There's a pool of money that we can use for a project from Arena. So how Arena works is typically they will do the gap that we were talking about. Arena will fund that interest-free. So if your payback period, say for example, is 4 years, they'll fund it over 6 years. So we've got a pool there of money for that. So we just haven't found the right project yet, but we're looking. And I think I've got a meeting with the Hong Kong government next week. The Hong Kong government and Singaporean side, we're doing a much better job. I just need to get my stuff together in Australia, so I will. Yeah.
Yeah, congratulations, great work.
Thank you. Sorry. Oh, no.
Doug.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Ian, I'm sorry. Didn't see you there, brother.
Doug, what has happened to the greenhouse?
What has happened to the greenhouse?
Yeah. Is it off the agenda? We have no talk about it.
Well, there was a harvest done just... Actually ate some tomatoes from there the other day. There you go. We haven't got the data back yet for that last grow season, so we'll have that. We were having discussions as a management team yesterday about we need to reglaze it. So thinking that we're going to reglaze it with a couple of different products so we can do some A and B testing on the effectiveness of the glass. So at the moment it's glazed with a version 1 TGU, triple glazed unit. I would like to glaze part of it with our greenhouse, 5mm greenhouse product, because I think that's where the big volume is in that industry, and perhaps a DGU as well. So we're not by any means forgetting that. Yeah.
Oh, hi, Doug. Just a question. Back in August, you talked about the pipeline of opportunities being around 50-odd. In that recent presentation just then, you mentioned that 75% of our pipeline now is coming through our licensees.
Yes.
So what is the projection at this stage, given August it was around 50? Where are we at with the pipeline opportunities now? I missed it, sorry. Oh, we're at 77.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
some falling off because we get, our only risk is not, we don't lose to other solar companies, right? What we lose to sometimes is what they call value engineering.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's a bit of swing and roundabout, but I'm pretty confident that what I can say for sure is going into this to 2026, this is the best situation we've ever been in.
Okay.
Yeah,
Do you
it's for us
see
to deliver it.
do you see the opportunities coming from the Middle East or Asia, given the significant partnerships we've established now?
The thing that really makes me, feel really comfortable, I guess, is that for the moment, the ones we've been working on that are nearly there are ones that we sort of develop ourselves mostly. But the fact that these companies that we've done license agreements with, these are not small players. It's not, as I like to say, Fred in a shed. These are significant businesses, and I think that as we roll out together and as we do that implementation, then our proposal level will go up diametrically. So,
Thank you.
You just stated that you're presenting to large glass companies around the world and people are coming to you to be partners. have you ever thought of trying to raise capital through those companies rather than to people who are just going to flick the share out the day after?
Well, for some of these companies, we'd be our current market cap would be roughly the same as their stationery bill. And but the issue is, now you're really getting into where do I see, how does that going to be, right? And what I think is that the obvious thing that's going to happen to this company, I think, is that someone will give us a takeover bid. And, one of these, because the building industry is so huge, and it's a question of us protecting our IP, and it's a question of us protecting our human capital. Because, I'm telling you now, if I'm running St. Gobain or I'm running a big cladding company, and I wanted to understand how I managed to make a solar panel fireproof, I'm going to be ringing my people. Because that's the quickest way. And so we need to be mindful of what our risks are, but I think that, we've clearly patented everything to an inch of its life. And I've already patented the fire design, even though I'm not quite sure which the final one is, because we have to be very careful with our IP. I've had people try and steal our IP, big companies already. So in the end, but I do think that exit to a big glass company is probably going to happen at some point. But we don't want to do it too early either, because if we can deliver next year, which I'm pretty confident we can, this will be a different valuation and a whole different metric. We just got to do it, that's all. It's easy for me to say it, we actually got to do it.
No, my question was, if you need to raise capital to keep going, why can't you try to get your big industry...
No, I understand that, because basically... So the answer to that is, that is actually a bit in Europcar, right? So when part of the Europcar story was, Volkswagen are a bank, right? So Volkswagen Financial Services in Germany are a massive, massive company. And I think the numbers used to be something like, from memory, this is a long time ago, that, the car manufacturing, all the factories and everything, used to make about 600 million euro a year. And Volkswagen Bank used to make 2.8 billion. Now, I was going to them and I was trying to get them to invest in Europcar at a price of about 30 million Australian dollars. And that dead set would have been their stationery bill. But big companies, you would think because they've got lots of money that it's easy for them to write a cheque. But it doesn't really work that way. There's got to be a strategic reason, or there's got to be some compelling stuff. And while we have some pretty compelling stuff, and I do think that will happen in the future potentially, it's management time, right? When I raised the money for Europcar, the fund I was talking to was raising, the fund who invested with me was, I think at the time, $900 million US dollars they were running. Today they're running like 4 billion. If I pitched in that same deal under the same scenario, they wouldn't talk to me today. And the reason is because if you're running a $4 million investment, or you're running a $100 million investment, it almost takes almost the same resource, I think. So, so I think that, and the other thing I probably should say is that from a typical negotiation perspective, I don't think we want to be going to our partners and saying, we're almost out of money, give us a cheque, That doesn't really work. But I think we want to be, I think that we will be able to, I don't have any stress about, I think we have a plan, or I certainly do, for what we're going to do capital-wise. And I think we have, as we did the last raise, the same if we have to go again, it will be on the best terms we can get for you guys. And as I said, I think we did a pretty good job last time. I don't know what you guys think. You may just say you want to throw a rock at me, possibly, but we will certainly do our best, right? Okay. Oh, sorry, another question? Sorry,
yeah, John Hart, New Zealand. Victor alluded to earlier on how you came into the company, Doug, helping out at the glass house, and you started out 1 day, 2 day, and carry on. Can you give us that story in your words, please?
Okay. Well, goodness, that's a long time ago. So, Vic's right. I met ClearVue when I was doing some consulting for another solar company, and we did the electrical work on the greenhouse. And Vic was, we were having coffee one day, and Vic was telling me, you know, it was difficult on the sales side and stuff like that. And I said, well, you know, if you want, I can come help you one day a week. So I used to run the finances for a big logistic. So I was doing like 2 other jobs, right? Like guys who I knew who called me to give them a hand for something. And so that's how it started. And then as we sort of went down the path, you know, I realised anyway that, you know, that some of the design, you know, wasn't what it needed to be. So we had to, and that's what took us down the R&D path. Yeah. So that was pretty much how it happened, as Vic said. So, and, you know, I think, and, you know, you guys know already that, you know, I place a lot of value on my team, right? And and that's because, you know, the value this company has today and the value that we raise the money off is largely because of their work. Okay, thanks you guys.